In today's video, we have a massive tropical update for you guys. We now anticipate likely a tropical cyclone that we're going to be tracking as it develops, moving into the southern Caribbean, which is a very favorable area currently in the tropics. This is going to pose threats to Central America, the Caribbean, the Gulf Coast, the East Coast. Really, nobody is safe, and we have multiple models showing multiple solutions. We're going to be diving into that today. We also have a lot of storms happening, especially in the central and eastern United States, where activity is much higher than it has been over the last few weeks and really the majority of August. We also have multiple cooldowns that we are tracking, especially here over the first half of September, where things look rather cool compared to normal. So we're going to be discussing all of that today. Be sure to check out Prestige Weather that you can now find underneath this video in our shop section. You will notice that it says $99, but that is for the lifetime subscription. It's still $4.99 per month for the month-to-month subscription. You can access it right now for 99 cents on your first month if you use discount code DIRECT at checkout. Only 2 more days of that promo, so be sure to grab it now if you do want to get it at that discounted price. We have awesome posts going on there, and we just uploaded our official final fall forecast for the fall of 2024 there, and the official September forecast for September of 2024. So if you want to gain access to all 2 of those forecasts, among other that we are doing for early access on screen here, be sure to check it out. We are doing a $50 giveaway within Prestige Weather, and I want to be doing multiple of these upcoming. But this one specifically is going to be when our next named storm is going to be. You will add your guess as far as the date and time, and you will win $50 if you win. The rules will be provided within Prestige Weather, so be sure to check it out. For only 99 cents a month, you guys can gain access to that potential $50 winning. We're going to do a lot more of those, including a September photo competition where the winner will also get a prize. I don't know how much yet. We've also opened up the Prestige Weather Discord server to the public, at least in a limited fashion. I want to give you guys a little bit of a free sample, kind of give a little bit of free access to that. So you can find that in the description down below, where you can join the server as a free member and gain access to a few perks. Anyway, with all that being said, I know that was so much. Let's dive into things and take a look here at the upcoming pattern. And as you can see, I'm going to take us straight to later this afternoon on Friday, and you can see already the active stormy pattern across a lot of the United States, the 4 corner states, the South Central, the Midwest and Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, the deeper South and Southeast, Mid-Atlantic here. Really, the Northeast is the only area kind of missing out there, but they will be seeing some storms rather soon. There's a couple of factors here. One is we have a strong low over the Hudson Bay, bringing a rather decent cold front here to a lot of these states in here. Out ahead of this cold front, we see here what we often see with these, which is a surge of warmth, humidity, and storminess out ahead of things. So that is why we see a lot of this pocket in here out ahead of that frontal boundary. Very interesting. You might notice, I've talked about this a lot, the homegrown systems. You know, I got a comment today that's like, you're always saying there's going to be a homegrown system, but it's never going to happen. Literally today, the National Hurricane Center went ahead and plopped a chance of development here offshore of Texas and Louisiana. So this area here does have a chance of development, not only over the next 48 hours, but over the next 7 days. I think it's a 10% chance over the next 48 hours, 20% chance over the next 7 days. As I always say, these chances typically start out that small, and then they either fizzle out or they begin to increase. So this is going to be something to watch over the coming few days. Keep all of this in mind for that competition in Prestige Weather, by the way. And we're also watching, this is not our major tropical cyclone. We have one out in the middle of the Atlantic that we're going to be seeing come on screen here and striking the Gulf Coast actually on this model run in just a little bit. So stay tuned for that, just to get that information. Very important stuff. Saturday, August 31st, we see this cold front is stretching further southward. Again, we talked about this for the past few days, but this will be becoming more stationary over time, which will mean these storms are just sitting over the same areas, bringing really high chances of flooding for some areas, which is definitely going to be something to watch for. Again, here is that area of tropical interest. Let's take a look at Sunday on September 1st, and this is the first real day where we see this major cool down taking place. Really intense trough here in the east. This is going to be bringing much colder temperatures compared to what's normal for this time of year. And yes, I said colder. Those lows could creep into the 40s, so definitely going to be cold. You know, you see your breath at 40. 40 is cold for a lot of folks, especially when we're talking about the first day of September here. Here is that stationary front where, again, flooding is definitely going to be a concern. We see a couple of areas of tropical interest. I'd say nearby Florida is definitely of interest, and then nearby Louisiana there by the 1st. By Monday on September 2nd, we're left with a little bit of a quieter pattern for most areas. Big ridge out west, large trough in the east here, and overall this is allowing for cold to free flow into the eastern states still by September 2nd. Rather warm and dry out west. We still see an area of storminess now stretched further south, still pretty stationary, so these storms will be moving really, really slow, which again just elevates that chance of flooding, so we're going to continue to watch for that. I know I just keep mentioning the homegrown systems, but we still see south of Louisiana some interest, near Florida, and then also off the southeast coast, we would watch for development in any of these areas. I cannot stress this enough, but these areas are so favorable for tropical development right now because of those sea surface temperatures that any little bit of low pressure that tries to form in here could rapidly intensify into a very damaging system. So that's why I always feel the need to mention it, because that is just an inherent chance here with this type of a pattern, given the time of year that we're in and given the current conditions. So it just has to be mentioned. As we keep going towards Tuesday on September 3rd, it really looks similar to Monday. I would say the only difference here is that we have some showers across the Rockies region here, but still the deep south is where a lot of your moisture is at, a lot of those storms. And again, a couple areas of interest here across the Gulf and southeast for tropical development. Now, we see this ridge is kind of stretching further east, but we see an inversion there in the trough, so something like this is what we're seeing. So some cooler air is allowing itself to move into the deeper south central states and still into the east here. This warmth is kind of pushing up again a little bit towards the northeast. As we keep going, this is going to be Wednesday, September 4th. You might think, hey, the cold looks like it's coming to an end, and it definitely does by this point, that first cooldown. But the key word here is first cooldown. There is multiple here. As we've been kind of tracking this, we see, again, a lot of moisture in the Gulf. We'll continue to monitor that. The southeast looking pretty juiced, but look at that right there. You might not even be able to see it on screen, but just to the south of Haiti and Dominican Republic, there is that major tropical system that we could be tracking. The jet stream pattern by this point looks like the trough is coming to an end. That warmth is making a push back into the east. That humidity is going to be rising. But there is this cooldown currently taking place for Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. It will be moving eastward. All coming due to this low south of the Hudson Bay, very similar to that first one that caused the first trough. We're kind of stuck in a loop here with, you know, the same thing happening again. But as we move towards Thursday, we can tell that this one is a lot more significant than the previous one. Cold front stretching down into the upper Midwest. Really cold temperatures here for a lot of Canada moving in. We see a ridge developing up the west coast, which is typically going to be a promising sign at cold moving through. Warmth is still moving up the east coast, but that will be changing here very shortly. There is a little bit of low pressure trying to form off the southeast here. Definitely something to watch. And same story here across the north central Gulf of Mexico. A couple areas of lower pressure trying to take off desperately. And then we see near Jamaica a weak tropical system that won't be weak for long on this model run at least. By Friday on September 6th, we can tell that the cold is being unleashed here into the east. This is really rapidly moving southward, this strong Arctic blast that will likely bring October or even late October-like temperatures, I would say, is the best way to put it. Still a little bit of a cold front here along the east, so expect some potential thunderstorms and strong showers to be possible. We also have some lower pressure out there off the southeast and mid-Atlantic. Keep in mind that anything forming that far offshore of the east coast would likely be a non-threat. The only reason that I really feel like mentioning it is because this model could be off with that location. In other words, it could be correct about the low pressure and tropical low pressure at that forming. It could just be too far east with it. So there is a lot of variables at play, especially we're beyond 5 days, so there is some room for error here. Still a lot of storms located off the southeast and the Gulf, so there is other opportunities as well. But the main one is going to be this area right here that is now rapidly developing It's heading right for this sweet spot. I always call it the sweet spot because if it doesn't hit Cuba and it doesn't hit Mexico and goes right in between, that's kind of like a tunnel for a storm system to move through without really having to deal with the land interaction. If it moves over the Yucatan Peninsula there, that will greatly break up the storm as it does so. Even Cuba can have the same effect, and it'll just kind of slow down the system. But if it manages to meander its way straight through the middle there, it will still have some land interaction, but a lot less. So that would be kind of the worst case scenario, I would say, is a good way to put it. By Saturday afternoon, we could see that, if anything, but again, the models can be pretty off right at this kind of range. We do see this system is a 980, and it is leaning more towards the Yucatan Peninsula than Cuba there at this point, moving northward, northwestward sort of. We see a massive trough in Western Canada as well with this, or in Western Canada, we see a major ridge, and then Eastern Canada, we see a major area of cold. This is pouring into the United States, even colder than the previous cooldown that we saw before it. That cold front is located right along the East Coast here, where again, storms such as thunderstorms and showers would be likely within there. We see a lot of showers here at the very bottom of the trough here, and you can expect them to kind of have a twist to them around the bottom there. That would be the look. Let's take it one step further towards Sunday on September 8th. And we see this ridge is really healthy over Western Canada, and this trough is digging deep over the east here. Oftentimes when you see a trough with this kind of upswing in the winds, you do get major storms along that eastern side, and we are seeing that here over the eastern states. If this was wintertime, you would be watching for a major snowstorm here across some of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Great Lakes into portions of Canada. That would be kind of the look here because of this low that is trying to form here. Kind of getting excited for the wintertime, if you can't tell, kind of going over hypotheticals here. We see this tropical low is still at 980 millibars. It's right on the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula there, and really the sky's the limit with where this one can go and how intense it can get, especially since the Southern Caribbean and the Gulf are the very most favorable areas in the tropical Atlantic right now. We do have a lot of model guidance not even showing it go that far west. We have some showing off the East Coast, some showing a more I would say Eastern Gulf strike. This European model so far is in the middle kind of, and we even have some heading through the Southern Gulf of Mexico there. So there is a lot of scenarios at play, which again, we will dive more into in just a little bit. By Monday on the 9th, it's evident that this storm is going to pose a major threat to the Gulf Coast here, especially the central Gulf Coast on this model. It's down to a 971 millibar low pressure center, intensifying well beyond hurricane status. I would say this is likely at least a category 2 on this particular model. I don't like to dive in too much to the categories in the long range, but for reference, that is how strong this model shows it getting. That can vary a lot in the long range. Obviously, the intensity is very hard for these storms to nail down in the long range, so definitely take that part with a grain of salt. We see the same thing happening with this ridge and trough where it's kind of getting inverted a little bit. Here we see just really significant cold air able to dive in through this trough, and this would bring very mid-fall type temperatures here in the first week or two of September. We see this ridge is reaching high up into Canada, and that is really aiding in the significant dips and ridges and troughs happening across the United States. This is an intense look, I would say. And again, look at the major storminess happening on the upswing of that trough on the eastern end. That is crazy looking. Again, this would be a major snow system across these areas. Definitely fun to think about, and that is what's lying ahead of us for the month ahead. Now, the GFS model, we're just going to dive through it, mostly referring to the tropical system here. Here is that same trough in late, or kind of like the second one here. We see that on this model, this low hits Cuba, not the Yucatan Peninsula. So it's a little bit different, but not too much. We're seeing a jet stream pattern, something like this is what we're seeing. Very cool across that trough. And this storm would likely look to head up into that jet stream. Let's see what happens here, though. Yeah, and that's basically what it does. It follows the storms down to a 980 there, approaching the panhandle of Florida there, down into the 960s. Yeah, it looks like it gets into the 960s, which again would be an intense hurricane. Don't pay too much attention to where it's striking, but this one does show a Gulf Coast strike. particularly in the panhandle of Florida, but this could change significantly. And then it does basically the worst case scenario, which is moving straight up the East Coast, bringing potential flooding to all of these states. So this would be a very significant look. We also get a little bit of tropical development here around the 12th over the southern Gulf that heads directly northward, maybe towards Texas or Louisiana. Take that with a grain of salt. More of a sign that this model just sees a very favorable pattern with more areas of interest across the Gulf beyond even this main system that we're discussing today. Now, the Canadian model, we're going to look at the vorticity here, which really just measures large-scale rotation in the atmosphere. And what we see happen is this storm moves in, raging south of Jamaica and then hitting the Yucatan Peninsula. This is a very far southern example. Like I said, southern Gulf of Mexico. And this one really doesn't pose a threat to the United States on this model. It really just strikes Mexico there well south of Texas. Obviously, that would be a very impactful system for Mexico, but usually these systems that are further south like that don't intensify quite as much as if they move towards the northern Gulf. That's not always true, but that is just kind of a rule of thumb here. This is where things get really interesting. We're going to move towards the European Ensemble model, and this is going to be every member's low location, which on this particular model, there's 50 Ensemble members. So we're going to get 50 different models' opinions here. You'll kind of understand a little bit more of what it is in just a little bit. Don't pay too much attention there to the colors. The main thing here is those L's. So we see this model. It's really tight with them near that Eastern Caribbean area where we see, they're all relatively within a couple hundred miles of each other. They're going to spread out a lot here as this model goes further and further out. This is a good example of what I always talk about when the models get averaged out. You guys might wonder what I mean by that. Well, this is exactly what I mean. Now we're talking about, 500 or 1,000 miles apart here across the Southern Caribbean and even some near the Bahamas. And this is a massive difference on a lot of these. So many possibilities are at play. But the main thing that stands true is a majority of these models do show something developing. It's kind of just a matter of where and how intense. There is a couple of these, like this one here, 933, which would be absolutely a major hurricane beyond what we could even really imagine. I mean, that's just insane. But a lot of 950s, a lot of 960s, 70s, 80s, those would be very intense tropical cyclones. There's a couple up in the 990s or even 1,000 millibar like we see here. Keep in mind that a lot of them in the south here are less intense, as you can see. Like I always talk about, that is not a favorable area. And then a lot of them that are over open water up here are a lot more intense. Let's keep going. I'm going to show you what happens after this point. We see them spread out even further. Now we have systems in the eastern or the western Gulf of Mexico, off the southeast coast here, and everywhere in between. Many strong systems off the southeast, many strong systems in the middle of the Gulf, and a few in that eastern Gulf of Mexico area as well. Definitely a lot of scenarios at play, and they all kind of just move out after that point. So yeah, a lot of spread happening here. When I play it out like this, you can see how they all just spread out and show a bunch of different scenarios. Here is a model. This is a really good website, weathernerds.org, where we can see the entire kind of spaghetti plot of this. This is a separate system back here. Let me show you exactly where it is. This system here is a separate system here that the models are kind of picking up on for the middle of the Atlantic. Would be a little bit less of a threat for now, at least. But here's your main system here, and it really spreads out, as you can see. So if I was to draw a cone through this, something like this is what we're seeing now. So as you can tell, that would put the entire Gulf of Mexico at risk, the entire Caribbean, and a lot of the southeast coast and even up the east coast at risk of seeing a very, very major tropical system. As you can tell, the most intense storms kind of lie within this area, and the ones that go south, like I mentioned earlier, do not intensify quite as greatly. So that would be something to pay attention to as well. This would be a much less impactful scenario than this would. This would be very bad news and likely spell a major hurricane in the Gulf or Caribbean, which is just crazy to think about. So with all that being said, let's move into a little bit back into the continental. Well, you know what? We got to look at the European AI model. My bad. But we'll just glance past this. This model actually is one of the only ones where we don't really see anything major coming, which is interesting because this one has had the kind of tendency to show a lot happening. But this one moves straight into Central America and stays over land, and I think that's why we don't really get much development. In the eastern Gulf of Mexico, it looks promising, It just heads straight towards, I would say, the southern Central America areas, and it has way too much land interaction, and we never really see anything come of it. So very interesting there. Let's take a look at the total precipitation. Keep in mind there is a tropical cyclone at play here, so that is influencing things a little bit. But we see above average precipitation really spreading throughout the east. It's not present everywhere in here, but it is expanding and it is becoming a more prevalent thing for the upcoming pattern, which is a far stretch from what we saw previously for a lot of August, which was far below average precipitation. So this is what I've been talking about, where activity is on a huge upswing here. Let's take a look at the GFS Ensemble models precipitation anomalies, and we see above average for a lot of these areas across the South Central, Deep South, even some of the Ohio Valley and the Southeast here. This continues to grow and become more intense every single model run. Now the temperature pattern, here's cooldown number 1, which comes after this hot spell that we've been in. Again, I've iterated this, I think, enough, but I've been forecasting this warm-up in between these for the entirety of the time. I never expected that, this final week of August was going to be the cold phase. It was always early September that we've been talking about. So many people see my videos and they're like, it's so hot outside right now, you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm pretty sure all they did was looked at the thumbnail and saw he's calling for cold and just assumed I meant the entire, I don't know, forever. I don't know where you really draw the line there, but I guess from that point forward, which, as you guys know, just isn't how my videos work. You have to watch the video and see how I'm breaking it down, because it's just too much information to encapsulate in a thumbnail, of course. Let's keep going. And you see this cooldown really moving in. Here's the 1st of September. Here's the 2nd of September. And these greens are significant. That is 10 to 15 degrees below normal. We see a lot of that for the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, interior Northeast, and Eastern Canada here. Meanwhile, very far above normal temperatures out west, which is aiding in causing this cold to dive southward in the east. Here is the 3rd of September, the 4th, and look, it's pretty exclusive for the East Coast by this point. There's even some warmth here for a lot of the Midwest and central states, more like. But there's another monster brewing, and that is another cooldown moving from the west into the east here. So let's watch this play out. Here is the 5th. Keep in mind, East Coast stays cool, so we could see continuous cold in the east, really. The East Coast, that is, mostly east of the Appalachian Mountain Range, actually, from September 1st onward. So that is going to be a little bit of a different story there, especially the lows are quite cool. Here is the 7th, 8th, again, so intense here. So intense. We're seeing 10 to 15 degrees, and it's bordering on 15 to 25 in some areas here in the upper Midwest, South Central. I'm happy for you guys. I know how hot it's been. It's looking a lot cooler here. And look, this just sticks around the east for days. This is the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. And look, we get another one here around the 15th popping up on this model, diving southward. So it doesn't even really end on this model run at all through the halfway mark of September. That would be a crazy way to start out the month of September, to say the least. Here's kind of the long range outlook. So here is the 31st through the 5th of September. Here is the 5th through the 10th, looking even colder, as we just saw. The 10th through the 15th, it becomes a little bit more exclusive for the east. The 15th through the 20th, a little less cold. The 20th through the 25th looks the warmest, especially when we consider that there is cold along the west now. That definitely plays a big time role here. As we keep going, here's the 25th through the 30th, again, quite warm in the east. Then the 30th through the 5th, warm. But look at this, growing concerns over cold. Here's the 1st through the 6th. And then the 5th through the 10th, or let's do the 6th through the 11th here, colder in the east for sure. And we get more of that for the 9th through the 14th. So it's kind of looking like we're going to be cooler in the first half of September, maybe warming in later September, followed by another cold start the next month for October. And then we'll have to see what happens after that. So it could be this kind of roller coaster up and down, which is a very, very realistic forecast, might I add, that we see oftentimes. Here is the CFS daily model for the entirety of September. And you can see that overall the trend looks warmer here, especially in the Northwest and Western Canada, and then much cooler here for basically most areas east of the Rockies. Unless you're in the Northern Plains, it's a little bit warmer, but most areas east of the Rockies here are colder than normal for the month of September here. So that is the outlook right now from the CFS model. Again, you can gain access to that September forecast and even our final fall forecast in Prestige Weather, which you can find underneath this video, as well as the pinned comment, the top right corner of your screen. You can pretty much find it anywhere. Let's take a look here at the National Hurricane Center outlook. And as you can see, We have a lot going on. One here near the Gulf, where again we have a 10% chance of development over the next 10 days, or 48 hours, better yet. 20% chance over the next 7 days. So still rather low, but this did just pop up, so we could see this increase, or we could see it fizzle out. Boom or bust, really. I like what they say at the end of this if you're reading it, but regardless of development, heavy rains could cause some flash flooding across portions of coastal Louisiana and upper Texas coast during the next few days. I think it's important to note that without formation, we're still seeing a lot of these storms, these tropical downpours that I've been calling for multiple days now, could be quite impactful whether there's development or not. Our next system down the line is this major system that we've been discussing. Over the next 48 hours, there's no chance of development. This is more of a medium term one, because over the next 7 days, there is a medium 40% chance of development. This did briefly move up to a 50% chance yesterday, but back down to a 40 today. So we'll have to see what happens with this, but I think that there is a rather high chance of development, especially if it does not strike Central America and it moves kind of starting to move northward towards the Gulf. I think that's where we could rapidly see development as it approaches Cuba or the Yucatan Peninsula, or again, the sweet spot. We have another one developing off of Africa in that MDR, which is short for main development region. And this one currently sits at a 0% chance over the next 48 hours, but a 20% chance over the next 7 days. We'll have to see what comes of it. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Be sure to join Prestige Weather again in the description, pinned comment, top right corner of your screen underneath this video. You really can't miss it. Be sure to subscribe. We do upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.